I'm Matt Miller.
And I'm Hannah Elliott, and this is Hot Pursuit.
You may have noticed that we sound a little bit different. I'm in my basement in Scarsdale today, and Hannah is in a boutique hotel in Paris. We're going to talk about that, but obviously it affects the audio quality. It's different than when we're both in the studio. Also, a reminder that you can send us an email and give us any suggestions or ask us any questions. We've had some really good back and forth with a couple of listeners over the past couple of weeks, and we want to keep that going. Our email address, Hannah?
hotpursuit@bloomberg.net. Not .com, .net.
.net. That's very important. Okay, in terms of what we're going to talk about today, I want to focus mainly on Paris. Just Paris in general, but also on the classic car show that Hannah is attending, Retromobile, as well as the RM Sotheby's auction. And I also want to talk about a conundrum that I have, which is finding a family vehicle that is not a minivan and isn't powered by a V6. It's very difficult, actually, especially if you're on a constrained budget. So it'll be helpful to talk about those things. Let's kick it off with the, obviously, the Retromobile. And Hannah, just first off, you're there. Tell us what it is, because a lot of people maybe haven't heard of Retromobile.
It's a quintessentially Parisian experience to be at Retromobile, which it's kind of like the SEMA show, but for classic cars. So if you know the SEMA show, you know that it's an aftermarket show. It's for off-roading vehicles and for big trucks and for suppliers and for brokers. That's kind of what Retromobile is. It's a big classic car show in Paris at the Port of Versailles. And it's for a lot of aftermarket sellers and dealers, people who make parts and components for classic cars, people who do restorations and modifications. It's not for, obviously, the big OEM type brands, although we're starting to see a few come here, which is an interesting thing. That's a bit new. It's for the aftermarket, guys. It's for the real enthusiasts. It's for the collector and the real passionate classic car enthusiasts. And it's incredible. It's 3.5 days in Paris. And then there are auctions as well. So it's pretty incredible. And what I love as an American coming here is I see a lot of cars that we never see in the United States. You know, yes. French brands, of course, which it's incredible. I really recommend going if you can.
I would love to be there and check it out. I'm not sure about French brands. And a lot of European cars that we don't see in the States, I'm pretty happy about. I'll get a lot of hate for that. But the whole kind of Jalopnik crew and their obsession with Citroën, I never got that. I can't get into these vehicles that are, I think, less about performance and more about French design. But tell us a few that you think have been really interesting.
Okay, so that's a fair point. But I would say the old Citroëns from the 70s they're like so ugly, they're beautiful. Phil Toledano said this French phrase. If you know him, he's Mr. Enthusiast. He's a car and a watch guy. He said the French have a phrase which is called beautiful ugly. I don't know the French version, but that's kind of how I see a Citroën. As my mom would say, it's so ugly, it's cute. So yeah, you've got the Citroëns, of course, but then you also have, and I think you might be a little bit more interested in these, Matt. You've got the rally cars from Group B that sort of never made it to the States. And you've got rally cars that like won Dakar, or you got rally cars from, I don't know, other obscure European rallies. And they could be Audis, they could be Porsches. We've got the Rothman Porsche here, the actual original one. They could be weird Toyotas. They're really cool off-road stuff that we just don't see in the U.S. because they're from really obscure European rallies. So that's cool. And then you get really rare things like last night, Simon Kitson, who's a really well-known dealer here, he sold the Ullenhout Mercedes, the most expensive car ever sold. That came from Simon Kitson. He's got a booth here, and he had a white Ferrari GTO, which I've never seen a white one. So it's very obscure, unique, rare oddities that might have originated in Europe and never actually made it to the United States. So you feel as an American that you're seeing really interesting, cool things. And of course, the car you mentioned, the Rolls-Royce Camargue, which I'm starting to like it. I didn't like them at first. It's this very square Rolls Royce. This one was from 81. But the thing is, it's Pininfarina design. So it comes by its looks very honestly. And I don't know, it's kind of growing on me.
How do you spell that? And what is it exactly? A Camargue? I mean, because I thought Rolls-Royce only made, especially in the 80s, their standard, like the car that you have, or
Yes, the Silver Shadow.
they're like
The
the
big
S.
stately
I think
ones.
I think the SZ body cars are from the 80s, right? So what is the Camargue?
Yeah. So the Camargue, you spell it Camargue. And it is a two-door, it's a big sedan, but it's two doors and it's square. It kind of reminds me of an Aston Martin Lagonda from the same era. It's completely squared off. And like I said, designed by Pininfarina. This one had some really cool details like brushes on the headlamps to literally brush off the headlamps. They're horsehair brushes, which I thought was really interesting. It's got two bench seats. The interior of this one was basically pure white, and this was kind of the unloved, undervalued Rolls Royce. The one I saw last night, the estimate was like 65 to 85,000. It sold for just over $50,000, and that probably was a good deal. I think that's about where the market is. So they're more expensive, for instance, than the Silver Shadow that I bought and own. That was like $20,000. So they're more expensive than that. But I do think, and from what I hear, that there's some room to grow because they're very polarizing. Some people hate them. It's a harsh thing to look at
Yeah.
sometimes, but it's fun.
Well, I like it a lot. And this is kind of in the ugly beautiful camp. I mean, not really. I think
Yes.
it's more beautiful, but it definitely is squared off and looks like it's got kind of an Oldsmobile Buick look, you know? I mean,
Yes.
like an
Yes.
American, big American car from the 80s, but the horsehair brushes on the headlights are an interesting
Yes.
touch. And the one that sold had like a gold spirit of ecstasy, right?
Completely. Yes, completely. Yeah. I mean, it's it's an acquired taste. You kind of have, for me, it's like you just want to have fun with it. And that's what it is. But yeah, it's not for everyone. Oh, and another card just reminded me. I was going to say you might have trouble finding someone who can work on it for you in the States. I saw this cool Maserati Mistral that still had the dust on it. It was a barn find. Again, very rare Maserati. I of course, and I think the estimate on it was like $50,000. So these aren't crazy expensive. But then I start to think, well, who's going to work on this for me? And that's that's where the challenge comes in.
Yeah, for
Yeah,
sure. That's
yeah,
a kind of a weird car. That's a great example of these European cars that you don't see too much in the U.S. And I don't think it's a horrible thing because it's
yeah.
not really a beauty. I mean, Maserati did those big rear windshields, and I mean, it's an interesting car
Yes,
with an
yeah.
inline six, which is I always love an inline six. But by the way, the aftermarket part of Retromobile, is it a
Mm,
show that's aimed at restoring everything to original, or is it kind of increasingly resto mod? Because that's getting so big
mm.
here. Is it big there as
Yeah.
well?
It's big and it's getting bigger. It's both to answer your question. And that reminded me, Bizzarrini had a booth there, and Bizzarrini is kind of like the thinking man's Ferrari. It's similar design, similar engine from the same era, race cars that look like Ferraris. Bizzarrini is actually doing full on continuation cars that they were selling at Retromobile. So I don't know what the pricing will be, but their big thing, I was talking to their PR guy, is that they're doing continuation Bizzarinis that are a little bit bigger inside to fit men of your stature, for instance, Magnus.
Yes.
I mean, basically anyone who's over 5'8" and who isn't an actual race car driver size. So yeah, to your point, I mean, it's continuation cars from some of these old European brands that are really obscure, like Bizzarrini. And then yeah, it's restoration, components, parts, and then it is also it's sort of new old things too. There were tons of minis, tons of Fiats, that sort of thing too.
Yeah, I
So
mean,
really, really interesting.
I love the Bizzarrini, and those are very expensive. The continuation cars,
Yes.
they're like $2
It's
million
like Ferrari
dollars.
prices. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
They're very, very, and it's like, honestly, I think part of the reason why you might get a continuation Bizzarini is if you own an original one and you don't want to put the miles on the actual real one that you own. You might actually buy a continuation car to drive and enjoy that. And I know that sounds insane, but in this echelon of buyer, it actually makes sense because they don't want to devalue the original car that they own.
well, and
So there's a market for that.
I feel like that might be one of the coolest, a reason to go to Retromobile, because I love the continuation cars that are made in Europe versus
Mhm.
American kit cars, and they do continuation versions of like a Bentley 8. They do a
Yes,
continuation version of the Maserati
Jaguars.
250F,
Yeah, some
Jag
of the
as well.
Jaguar race cars. Yeah, I think it's fun, and some of those guys race those cars too, which is even more fun.
Yeah, I would just like to obviously drive around in one. And I love the idea of making older cars that are classic and beautiful just a tick bigger. I was looking at
Mhm.
some 60s Camaros, and I always, they look so cool in the shape, the silhouette. You see them in like cartoons always. There's a rip off of basically an old Camaro look for the bad guy. But they're too small for a modern person. And I always think it
Yes,
would be cool for someone to make a recreation of a late 60s Camaro in like 1.5 times scale because that would
yes.
be sweet.
Yeah, well, the guys from Bizzarini are totally on that wavelength, and they said, look, the car is going to obviously look the same as the original, but they are going to make it a little more livable for like the modern the modern driver who's had enough nutrition so that you can, get a little bit bigger.
Speaking of more livable and cars that you can drive around, we were talking recently about the Ferrari FF and how it might be a
Yes.
good, buy in the future. They're selling. They were widely panned when they first came out for being, I guess, ugly beautiful or more just ugly.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
I think they came out in 2010 or 2011, and now they're going for 100,000. I saw one recently went at auction for over $300,000, so it's already
What?
starting.
What? Why? Why? What did it have like 10 miles on it? Why was that so expensive?
No, it was white, and it had a red interior, and I don't
Oh,
think
I
I would
like
want a
that.
white FF, but I think people
I'd
are just
probably buy
starting to
that.
realize, Gen X, sorry, not Gen X, millennials and maybe Gen Z buyers, especially,
Yeah.
are wanting less of the sort of classic 60s and 70s cars and more into the 80s, 90s, and now I guess obviously the 2000s and 2010s. And they want more livable vehicles. So that FF,
Yeah.
obviously, with the back seats and the all wheel drive, it's always an automatic transmission, I believe. It's just easier to deal with.
Yeah, I think it really feels this year already that the car sales and the auctions are going that direction. For instance, at this RM Sotheby's auction, which was really great, by the way, it was in the basement of the Louvre, which I didn't realize you could have a car auction in the basement of the Louvre, but you can. Most of the cars that sold yesterday at this RM Sotheby's auction were modern collectible, modern classic cars. I mean, made from the 90s forward and really from the 2000s forward. And I think to your point, Matt, people want something you can drive and it's not annoying or just a heavy lift. You just want to drive and enjoy it.
Right. And I mean, my thing, obviously, because I'm, 6'4" and a big person, I want to be able to fit in the car. And I
Yeah.
also want it to be able to absorb a side impact if it happens.
Yeah.
I look at these classics from the 60s, and obviously I want a Mopar from back then, or, a late 60s Mustang or a Mach 1 or something. But I feel like I would be toast if I got hit in an intersection,
Yeah,
and that's why the newer ones are draw me to them. The
I know.
safety aspect is a big one for me as well. But so the auction
I
is in the
know.
basement of the Louvre, and
Okay.
what were some of the cool sales other than the Camargue? What else did you see there?
Okay, so this was really interesting because I noticed I went to the preview yesterday and I noticed that a lot of these cars were offered without reserve, which is great for us because it means that stuff's gonna sell. I think in the end they were, 82, 84 sell-through rate if I did my math generally, they're over 80%. So that was good. It was very interesting to see. There was most notably the car that did not sell that I think people thought might was this 911 GT2 that is the first GT2 and the only naturally aspirated GT2. And that car
Ah,
got bid up. Yes, so extremely rare, but that car had over 130,000 miles on it and it had been repainted. So that car got bid up to 1.9 million and did not sell, which was really interesting to me because
wow.
on the one hand, that's a lot of money and I'm really surprised that it didn't even meet reserve. But on the other hand, okay, I guess it had been repainted and it had a lot of miles. So that was just a surprise. I don't know if that's really a commentary on the whole market for GT2s. I think this is a really interesting, unique case. But that was, yeah, a 96 911 GT2. Really cool looking car, black on black, didn't sell.
That is,
So that was interesting,
I have to say
right?
that I've sort of I loved 993s when they came out, or sort of right after when they came out was when I was starting to get old enough to buy a car and could afford
Yes.
one. And I think at the time that I was looking, the 996 was the current generation, and people, uh, you know, nobody liked those broken egg
Hmm.
headlights. So people were looking at the used market, and 993s were already getting more expensive. And then later, of course, people would say, "Oh, it's the last air-cooled motor," so everybody was bidding them up like crazy. And I didn't love the way the headlights were so angled on
The
the
egg
hood.
headlights.
I
Sure,
preferred
of
the
course.
964, the kind of frog eye headlights, you know? So
Yep.
I was
Yep.
never that into them, but I saw a picture of this one, I think on Magnus's Instagram, and
Hmm.
130,000, I think it was kilometers, right? Not miles. 130,000
Yeah, that's probably right. Yeah,
kilometers.
there you
So it's
go.
not that
Yep.
high mileage, but still for such a high end supercar. At the time it was definitely a supercar. That's a lot of miles. Somebody
Hmm.
was clearly
Hmm.
daily driving this thing.
Which
And
is cool.
yeah, for sure. I love that. And what you guys always say is that, if you drive them more often, you're probably going to have less problems, fewer problems than you would if it's a
Hmm.
garage queen, right?
Hmm. Hmm. Yes. Yeah.
Was it really a GT2, or they didn't use that nomenclature, did they, at the time?
My understanding is they changed it. This was the one that they made under that nomenclature, and then they completely changed it. So it kind of snuck in and was basically a one of one before they swapped it over to GT3. That's my understanding.
Interesting.
So that, yeah, so that makes it very rare. The other one that was really interesting that did sell, while we're on the topic, is this 2004 911 GT2, but it's a club sport. And that was listed at an estimate up to 500,000 euros. And it sold for about half that, almost less, more than half, but almost 300,000 euros. So that one did end up selling,
That's a
but it was
steal.
for a lot less, right? It was for a lot less than the high estimate. Um, Again, I don't know what this means other than I think a lot of things were selling, and it's just interesting to note that the right things will sell, but the right person's got to be in the room. And if there's no one who happens to be in the room who wants, extremely rare GT2, it's not going to sell. So fascinating.
It really is fascinating. I mean, I can't believe
Yeah,
that the 993 didn't sell at 1.9 million with
I know. I
130,000
know,
kilometers on it, and then the
right?
2004 Club Sport goes for 300, and obviously in 10 years that's going to be the one that people won't believe didn't
Right.
sell for like 3.9 million. That's crazy.
I know. Yeah. So it kind of makes me think, and I did look at some of the, the Scottsdale auctions were recently, like a week and a half ago, and I think they were down a little bit. But, going into this year, it's still really too early to tell what everything is going to shake out to. But it seems like there are deals to be had, but there's no guarantee, and it's worth just looking at stuff because who knows? Who knows what's going to happen? We've been talking about Jaguars, and there was an XJR there that I saw that was listed for like €50, and I need to actually check and see if I forgot to check and see if it sold. But it
50,000
just
or
makes
50
me,
euros?
did I say €50? 50,000. Okay.
Because 50, I would bid on that for sure.
No, yeah, so would I. So I think the estimate was 50,000. I'm just now seeing, I'm looking at results. It went for €40,000. For an XJR, I think that's probably market value. It's the XJRS. But again, I don't know. There's stuff to be had. But to your earlier point, it seems like the modern collectible, modern classic, young timer type stuff is really going to be strong and popular.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I was recently looking at XJRs
I know
because
you mentioned that.
yeah, because not only are they, I think, they're so classy looking, and you
Hmm
can probably fit a couple of car seats in the back, which is very important to me right now. But they seem like pretty solid. I mean, the XJR has the 4-liter V8, which is apparently the perfect size, right? If you want a perfect engine, I guess 500 cc's per cylinder is what they've arrived at now. But the S is
hmm
a V12.
Fancy,
Yeah, very
fancy.
fancy. And
Yeah.
I'm loving the look of those, especially with the flying buttresses in the back. By the way, I looked up the Ferrari, and that you mentioned the auctions, this Scottsdale auctions, and that's where the
Yes.
Ferrari FF sold. It was $324,000.
What? That's
Yeah.
insane. That's crazy.
Well, you
I mean,
called
I
it. I
don't
mean,
get
you
it.
said this is going to be one of those cars, and I think Hagerty
Oh,
also had
well,
it listed as one of those cars that was poised to take off. And it looks like
yeah.
maybe it's happening
But
already. I want to just talk about Paris itself for a second, because
yes.
what a lovely city. And you have lived in New York, and you now live in Los Angeles, and now you're in Paris. So tell me about, just being there. What kind of cars are you seeing? What kind of people are you meeting? What are you doing?
I love Paris so much. I love it because the French have a certain amount of dignity and a strong appreciation for beauty. It feels like the French love beauty for beauty's sake and they value it. And I really love that. So I'm here half for Retromobile, but then also I'm trying to take a few days off and burn vacation days while I can at the start of the year. We'll see how that goes. But I've gone to the Rothko exhibit out at the Louis Vuitton Foundation, which is really excellent. I really recommend it. I didn't actually realize that Rothko had tried to do figure painting early in his career, which I had no idea, and it's not great, and that's why he gave it up. They also had his only self-portrait that he ever produced. So that was really great to see. I feel a connection with Rothko because I'm from Oregon originally, and he, of course, immigrated to Portland. So I like that about him, among other things. But that was great. Of course, there are dinners and that sort of thing. I'm going to go to Maxime's on Saturday, that
Oh,
old Paris. I know. I'm very excited about that. Apparently, it's
so
had a
romantic.
resurgence. Yes, yes. So that'll be great. Oh, speaking of flying buttresses, I walked past Notre Dame, and it's heavily under construction, but they are saying that by 2025, all the repairs from that fire that took it down will be done. So I guess not in time for the Olympics this summer, but by next year, all of the repairs from that terrible fire will be done. So that's exciting.
Where are you
Yeah, I'm staying
staying?
in the
Where I always find Paris
well,
interesting because they have so many cool boutique hotels that really are
yes.
fun and are actually affordable.
Yes, I have to say I love a grand hotel when I'm not paying for it, but when I am paying for it, it's really lovely to stay in a boutique hotel, and I'm staying at Hotel Amour, which if you know Andre Sariva, the graffiti artist who does those stick figure graffiti guys, it's his hotel. It's in the Pigalle, very close to Moulin Rouge. It's such a lovely, someone described it as a bohemian hotel, but it is really lovely. I'm in this sort of loft room with black mirrored walls, and it's a loft with skylights from the ceiling and sort of this Yves Klein blue on a couple walls. So it feels very Parisian, and it's really affordable. They're very friendly. I've stayed here many times. So I'm really liking it. It feels comfortable and charming and very French, which we love.
Very cool. It makes me nostalgic for
Yeah.
Paris. I would love to be there. I'm stuck in the suburbs here. You know, I just had my second kid, so I'm in full dad mode. And I'm looking for a family vehicle right now that isn't a minivan. And I've got a few constraints. So my wife has said I'm not allowed to spend more than $50,000. I feel like I could push
Fine.
that a little bit. But I don't want, like, for example, the Telluride is a great vehicle, but it's a naturally aspirated V6, and it's just like such a boring motor. And so many of them are. So I want something a little bit more special. And I've also got to be able to fit 2 rear-facing car seats, which is a huge constraint, by the way.
Okay.
I've narrowed it down essentially to 2020 Mercedes GLS 450. They're gigantic. And frankly, they might as well be minivans. But they have a really cool inline 6 that's supposedly very smooth. And I haven't test driven one yet, but I'm going to. Or 2019, brace yourself, Range Rover long wheelbase.
Oh, that's cool.
It's got a ton of room for rear-facing car seats, and it's got the supercharged 5-liter V8. I wouldn't go for the V6, but there are problems with reliability. Like even if I get one for $50,000, am I gonna be facing like $10,000 or $20,000 repair bills every year? That's my concern. So I wonder what your take is on those 2 vehicles, or if you can think of anything else that might be in the range.
Okay, well, obviously Mercedes seems like a solid bet. Yes, great. I don't know if you said GLS, right?
The GLS, it's just the big honker.
Yeah, it's the big one. I mean, do you like how that looks?
I don't hate how it looks. Like I said, it almost might as well be a minivan. Everyone talks about it as a bus. But the thing is, my problem is we have an XC90 right now, and I just got out of an SQ7, Audi SQ7 I was test driving for a week, which I absolutely loved. And with the rear-facing car seat, and my wife has chosen the biggest ones possible because she wants our kids to be so safe. I don't know how necessary that is. But it means that I have to push my seat forward, or the passenger, or now we have 2 kids, so both seats are going to be forward, and I just don't drive very well in that position. I need a lot of space. I'm American and huge, so there are very few cars that fit those rear-facing car seats. I was trying to get the BMW M760, and frankly, a 7 Series, a Mercedes S-Class, or an Audi A8, all of those, especially the long version, would fit the bill, but my wife refuses to get a sedan. So I've been pushed into the SUV territory.
I understand. Have you looked at any Cadillacs?
So the thing about the Cadillac Escalade, even the GMC Yukon, and even the Chevy Tahoe, the most recent generations of these, if you look at them with, say, 50,000 miles, 60,000 miles or less, they cost more than the Range Rover or the Mercedes.
Are you serious?
That I'm comparing them to. Yeah, I mean, part of the problem is that the most recent generation of those was, I think, 2021. So they're newer vehicles. But I think the other part of the problem is that, here in America, those are highly valued vehicles. So, I looked at, for example, I was looking at a Suburban. I wanted the diesel motor. Or even those are more expensive. So I'm kind of limited to these 2 vehicles as far as I can tell. And this is where, by the way, our email is really helpful. If any listeners can think of something, please shoot us a message, because I have about a month before I've got to make this purchase.
And it's hot pursuit. Hot pursuit at Bloomberg.net. Hot pursuit at Bloomberg.net.
Those big, body on frame trucks would be awesome. And I've actually gotten permission. My wife said, "Oh, I like the look of that Tahoe," but they're frankly more expensive than a slightly older used Mercedes or Range Rover.
How about the Jeep Grand Cherokee? They make a V8, right?
In fact, I love the Jeep Grand Cherokee L,
Okay.
the long version.
Okay.
I think it's the first time they've made those. Would
All right.
possibly fit just barely these giant rear-facing car seats, and they have the 5.7-liter Hemi. I'm a huge fan. I have
Sure.
a 6.4-liter Hemi in my Challenger, but my wife has ruled that out. She just doesn't like the
Why?
Jeep brand.
Oh, interesting. I mean, that's like such an iconic brand.
I think
Interesting.
it's, and
Okay.
also I think
Okay.
it's a beautiful redesign of the Grand Cherokee. I love the new grille. It's kind of angled in like the Jeeps of old, and the
Mm-hmm.
technology inside is amazing. Like they have interior cameras, so you can look at the kids on the front screen,
Oh, that's
and they've
cool.
got the Macintosh stereo system, which I think sounds pretty good. But yeah, no, I've those have been ruled out.
Okay, this is my last and final suggestion, and I know it's going to probably be a bit of a pain point, but does the G-Wagon not have enough room in the back
So
for,
we had the G
for
Wagon.
I
Uh,
know, I know.
yeah,
You liked it. You love it, right?
we both love it, and especially my wife loved it dearly, which I was kind of surprised by. It's interesting that she doesn't like the Jeep brand because some of my favorite or her favorite cars that I have had. She loved the Raptor and she loved the G
Cool.
Wagon, but the G Wagon is. I don't know how I was able to afford it 5 years ago, but it's so expensive, even used, it's
Yeah.
ridiculous. And
Uh,
it's a little too tight still for a rear-facing
mhm.
car seat. We were able to make it work with
Yeah.
the infant car seat, but once they get to toddler size, it's just too
Yeah.
small. So I think these are my only two choices: the older long wheelbase Range Rover, and I'm terribly concerned about the reliability.
Yeah,
And
that's a valid
it's
concern.
valid, right? Is it still valid
Yeah.
with the
Yeah. I think so.
L405? Because I know
I think so.
the previous version was bad, and
Yeah.
yeah, they're just so expensive to fix. And then I wonder, is the Mercedes going to be any better?
Mercedes has to be better. All I know is anecdotal evidence just off the top of my head, but I hear people complaining about their Land Rovers often in whatever form. And I just don't have this. I don't ever hear people bringing their Mercedes in for like stupid little repairs. That's anecdotal, but
Yeah, I know. I just feel like they have the air suspension too, and that seems to be one of the most expensive things to fix, or one of the things that goes wrong all the
yeah,
time. I guess
yeah,
I'll have to be test driving these two and possibly invest in an aftermarket uh, extended warranty. But that's where I am, and unless
yeah.
anyone can think of something better. Cool. I guess that's all we have time for this week. Again, please shoot us an email, hotpursuit@bloomberg.net. And obviously, we'll be back same time, same place next week. I will be driving next week the Ford F-250 Tremor with a
Yeah.
6.7-liter Power Stroke diesel.
Oh, this is gonna be. Here we go. I already know I'm gonna be getting texts about this.
All right. I'm Matt
Great.
Miller.
And I'm Hannah Elliott, and this is Bloomberg.